Hi everyone, my name is Bridget, and throughout this presentation, I will be analyzing how the Delta Gamma fraternity altered their leadership tactics to increase member satisfaction and engagement throughout the coronavirus pandemic. Before we begin, here's an overview of what will be discussed throughout this presentation. First, I will give an introduction about Greek organizations on college campuses and provide some crucial background information for anyone who is not aware of how these organizations are run. Next, I will follow with some personal experience as to why I chose Delta Gamma as a site of study for this project. Then I will share my research question and follow with an application of course concepts alongside information I found in a few of my cited references for my paper. Finally, I will conclude by summarizing my analysis of this particular organization. To begin, I wanted to give everyone some insight as to why Greek life organizations have become such an attractive community for college students to want to be a part of. Greek organizations originated centuries ago with their original intent being to create secret societies in which students could gather outside of classroom settings. In recent decades, popularity towards joining Greek organizations has grown exponentially due to the fact that they are now large philanthropic organizations that give college students the opportunity to expand upon their social skills and even more so, their leadership abilities. Within a particular Greek chapter, the organization is run by a group of members known as the chapter management team. For many students, joining Greek chapters is highly desired due to the possibility of joining an organization's chapter management team and getting some hands-on leadership experience. The reason I chose the Delta Gamma fraternity on San Diego State's campus as my site to study is because I have now been a member of the Delta Gamma fraternity for 3 years. Throughout these 3 years, I've been able to see which leadership strategies work best for running our organization. Moreover, what makes the site particularly interesting for me to further examine is the fact that I got to experience how the organization changed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. As such, the research question for my final case study is, how has the Delta Gamma fraternity chapter management team altered their leadership tactics to increase member satisfaction and engagement amid the coronavirus pandemic? Before I begin explaining what changes occurred due to the pandemic, it's crucial to understand the organizational structure of Delta Gamma. Delta Gamma has been run as a bureaucracy since its founding in 1873. A bureaucratic organizational structure is the most common type of organizational structure in contemporary organizations due to the fact that it is based on the legal rational authority type. Developed by sociologist Max Weber, a legal rational authority type relies on investing power into a set of rules or laws and often includes a fixed division of labor and a clearly defined hierarchy of positions. In Delta Gamma, the chapter management team is required to lead its organization on the basis of what is stated in our chapter bylaws. Bylaws refers to a set of rules that are used to guide a board's actions and decisions. Moreover, within Delta Gamma, we have a clearly defined hierarchy that flows from the national board to the chapter management team, to the junior chapter management team, and then to the average members. Each of these hierarchical positions also comes with a specific set of duties one must fulfill, even if you are just an average member. For our typical day-to-day activities, our chapter relies most on our chapter management team as a means to understand what needs to get done. As such, the chapter management team serves as the most important leaders within our organization. Throughout our course, we have learned that leadership is a process of producing change through establishing direction and aligning, motivating, and inspiring people. To better understand leadership styles within Delta Gamma, I focused on two types of leadership tactics: transactional leadership and transformational leadership. According to a communication article I found, transactional leaders exchange something of value with their followers to achieve consistent performance that meets agreed upon goals. Transactional leaders therefore work best under bureaucratic structures where an organization has a strict set of rules to follow. Subsequently, members of the chapter management team typically follow a transactional approach to leadership. More recently, however, transformational leadership has been adopted by many organizations due to the fact that it values creating change within an organization. This style of leadership has gained popularity because it allows for follower input when it comes to decision-making and it encourages intellectual stimulation and creativity amongst members of an organization. When working on my final case study, I became interested in better understanding how transactional and transformational leadership could be used together to lead an organization. Later in this presentation, I will go over how I was able to see that our chapter management team could use qualities of both transactional and transformational leaders to create a team that worked best for our evolving organization. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, Delta Gamma suffered as a result of having to adapt to a national disaster that they had never accounted for. Much like many other organizations, the pandemic altered our organization's day-to-day activities and forced us to engage in both crisis response and organizational change tactics as a means to keep members of our organization satisfied and engaged. As stated in our textbook, a crisis is a situation that runs the risk of escalating intensity, interfering with the normal operations of business, jeopardizing an organization's public image, and damaging a company's bottom line along the way. Some effects of COVID-19 on our organization were that meetings and events went fully online, allegations began occurring about members not following social distancing guidelines, women in Delta Gamma began dropping out of the sorority due to a lack of a normal sorority experience, our organization lost money due to the inability to host successful philanthropy events and to keep members a part of the chapter, and most importantly, the chapter management team was forced to reevaluate how to run our sorority and find new ways to keep members content. What Delta Gamma did poorly when responding to the crisis that was COVID-19 is that they first had a lack of transparency with information. As members trusted our leaders to relay information, much of the information they should have been receiving was not being said. This created a lack of trust within our organization and increased member dissatisfaction with how our leaders were handling this situation. Second, the chapter management team had a slow response time when it came to answering questions from members who were simply wondering what was going on, such as when we would ever have normal events again or where our money was going if we weren't having these events. Lastly, compared to other sororities, Delta Gamma began having a high dropout rate of members due to our leaders' lack of transparency and slow response time. This in turn led to a large decrease in member satisfaction and a disassociation with the sorority as a whole, which granted us a poor reputation across the Greek community. When it became clear that our organization was suffering as a result of not handling this crisis properly, the leaders knew that some sort of fundamental change needed to occur. So by now, I'm sure you're all wondering, how exactly did Delta Gamma alter their leadership tactics to remedy the issues that were occurring? Well, it began with our leaders implementing a large organizational change within the sorority. They began thinking of ways in which they could alter our sorority structure to be more adaptive to these changing circumstances and more accepting of member input as a means to bring levels of member satisfaction back up. Our chapter management team implemented two main organizational change initiatives to remedy this. First, they realized that the magnitude of change that needed to occur was major, so they implemented second-order changes, which, as we have learned, involved major pivots within the organization. This began with creating a clear line of communication, updating chapter bylaws, and breaking down the hierarchical structure we had in place. And second, they realized that change had been long overdue. So instead of making short-term changes that would go back once the pandemic subsided, they implemented long-term changes that would change the way that Delta Gamma would operate. The change that was implemented to increase member satisfaction and engagement within our chapter was to alter our organizational structure so that it would be less bureaucratic. Our leaders changed our chapter bylaws for the first time in years to create an organization that could be more adaptive to change without having to follow a strict set of rules that were outdated. And they created a less hierarchical structure in which open forums were held and average members can now speak to higher ups, such as members of the national board. Next, they changed their leadership style from more transactional to transformational. While they still had rules to follow, they realized that the chapter would benefit from being able to have the opinion of all girls heard and realized that creative new solutions needed to be voiced. To do this, they created activities that were meant to allow us to engage with one another on a more personal level, which in turn boosted member morale. They realized that the girls a part of this chapter had valuable information and ideas to share, and that it should not only be left to the leaders in charge to determine what was right for the organization. Next, they engaged in crisis response strategies such as corrective action and compensation by modifying leaders' behaviors so that there would be an open line of communication and more transparency throughout the chapter. They also realized that girls deserve to be compensated for the events that they could not participate in as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, so they reimbursed women and began allocating more money towards new events that would happen once we were all allowed to be together again. All in all, the changes in leadership tactics that the Delta Gamma chapter management team made increased member satisfaction and engagement greatly. The sorority is better as a whole now and has a team of leaders who have learned how to deal with and respond to unforeseen circumstances in the long run. Changing the structure and style of how our organization was run has increased satisfaction within the organization even more so than it was before the pandemic hit, and our reputation on campus has exceeded what it used to be. With that, this concludes my presentation. Thanks for listening, and here are my references.